Welcome to NBA Draft Junkies. It's Rafael Barlow, your host. This is the second podcast after the draft lottery. I did one a couple days ago that covered picks 1 through 14. Today I'll cover picks 15 through 30. Thanks for those that tuned in and watched the first episode. This episode is going to be pretty much similar. I'll just cover the picks and I'll discuss why I think this particular play would be a good fit. I upgraded, got a microphone to improve the audio. I thought the audio in the last episode was decent, but I wanted to make it better. So I went out, found a microphone. The cool thing about being in China, I didn't mention I'm currently located in Urumqi, China. I'm here for the CBA playoffs. Is I went looking for just some accessories to make this podcast a little better, a little professional. And in China, they have these underground worlds. So think of the subway system in New York. But they have, it's like the subway system in New York, I should say. And you go underneath, and there's like a whole mall of electronics, shoes, clothing stores. So I went to the electronics part, and I mean everything from laptops to printers to TVs, cameras, PlayStations, broadcasting equipment. So I went out, found this microphone, and it probably cost me, I want to say maybe like $7-8 US. So I'll probably keep going back down there and just try to see if I can find as much equipment as possible to upgrade, because I really want this podcast and these videos to be broadcast quality. So a couple years, maybe even a few months down the line, I can look back and see where we started at, because I definitely feel like if I keep on creating content and keep on putting in the work, I'll have a bigger platform. But anyway, so let's get back to the main subject at hand, and it is the NBA draft lottery. So the 15th pick would go to Detroit. I think Detroit should select Kevin Porter Jr. from USC. I'm a big Kevin Porter fan. I like his game. I like his skill set. I like his ceiling. There are some red flags. If you look at his stats on paper, they don't stand out to you. Watch his film, you can just see the talent. He can create his own shot. He's a good ball handler, pretty good shooter. You see his size, his athleticism. I think his ceiling, and this is a stretch, obviously, but his ceiling is he could be a poor man's James Harden if he could work on his, if he could just work on his passing instincts and his ability to create for others. But he has a tight handle, strong, and he's a one-on-one player. He's a guy that at the end of the shot clock, he can go get his own bucket. But there are signs that he could end up being Dion Waiters. Dion Waiters isn't a bad comparison. Excuse me. Dion is he's gonna have a pretty long career. The problem with Dion is his game is suited to be the best player on a team, but I don't think there are many teams where Dion could be the number one option. And then I say worst case scenario for Kevin Porter would be Nick Young. Nick Young again is another guy that can give you buckets. He can create his own shot when he needs to, but for whatever reasons, and you can pick whichever reason that you want. He had a good career, but he bounced around from team to team, and he was just he didn't really impact the game if he wasn't scoring. But I think Detroit could use Porter. They obviously have quite a few guards in their rotation, but they're lacking creators. Reggie Jackson's a pretty good creator. Luke Kennard is a shooter. Ellington is a shooter. Bruce Brown is more so of a defender. I think Kyrie Thomas, when he gets an opportunity, he plays pretty well. But none of those guys, outside of maybe Jackson, are one-on-one creators that at the end of the shot clock can get you a bucket or get to the foul line. So I think Kevin Porter would be a good pick for them. I think Dwayne Casey could be a coach that could bring the best out of him and help him maximize his potential. Next up, with the 16th pick, I have the Orlando Magic selecting Keldon Johnson. They may need to look at another shooter. I think Terrence Ross, I'm not 100% sure, but I believe Terrence Ross is a free agent, and he's had a pretty strong year, and he could look to leave elsewhere. But teams also always need shooting. Johnson is a shooter. He does have some issues as far as like creating off the dribble, creating his own shot. But if Orlando can get a healthy Markelle Fultz, and if he ends up being the player that we saw in Washington, and it seems like so long ago, but they'll need guys that around him that can complement his game and knock down open shots. And I think Johnson is the type of player that Orlando could use. Right now they have a lot of defensive-minded guys. They've been drafting long defenders the last few years, but Johnson would be a floor spacer and a good role player. The next pick is at 17. I got Rui Hachimura from Gonzaga. Right now the Nets are starting a rookie at power forward in the playoffs. I think Rui could give them some depth there. He's a guy that I think would fit in good with the Nets and what they're doing. Some people have him as high as a lottery pick. I don't have him that high, but I definitely think that he's a guy that will have a 10-year career, and he could help the Nets add some depth to their young core. I mean, what an amazing job Kenny Atkinson and Trajan Langdon and Sean Marks have done with that team, and Rui is a guy that seems like he'll be a good fit for their long-term plans. At 18, the Indiana Pacers select Nassir Little. I personally am not a big fan of Nassir Little. I think if you didn't know anything about the hype that he had coming into the season and you just watched him play, there's no way you would say this guy is a first-round pick. But let's be honest here. Somebody's going to take a gamble on him. There's somebody that sees the potential and the size and the skills, and they'll take the risk. And I think the Pacers are a team with, obviously they're a playoff team this year. They had a very good season. You can say they overachieved, but they have a lot of free agents, and Little is a guy that they could probably take some time to develop. They have a G League team where they can develop him there and possibly just help him maximize his skill set. I mean, he does have good size. He does have some intangibles. He plays hard. I just don't know, other than playing hard and crashing the offensive glass, what he brings to the table every night. So from there, I'll go with the 19th pick. I'll go with San Antonio, Goga Bitadze. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. I had a chance to watch him play a couple years ago at the Adidas Next Generation tournament in Istanbul, Turkey. And by far he was the most dominant player there. I had in my notes that I thought he was a potential NBA player. And here we are 2 years later, and he could possibly hear his name called in the first round of the draft. I think he's a Spurs guy. Great touch around the rim. If he can improve as a shooter and floor spacer, I think he'd be ideal. He kind of has a little bit of Jokic in him as far as just how he moves. He's not the passer as Jokic is, which Jokic is really a point guard playing center, but just how he moves and the whole, I don't know if it's the European center game, just the craftiness. He's not the greatest athlete, but he is able to make up for what he lacks in elite pop and explosion and athleticism by just using his body, his touch around the rim. And he, like I said, I like him. I think he'd be a good fit for San Antonio. And maybe he has a chance to be a starter as a rookie. So now we go to pick number 20 in the Boston Celtics. And I have Boston selecting Tyler Herro from Kentucky. Tyler's a guy who could probably end up going a little bit higher. Obviously, he's a shooter. That's his role. But I think that he's also a pretty decent passer, and he has a nice step back. He can create his own shot. He's not like a one-on-one guy, but he's good at attacking closeouts and creating space with his feet to get to his sweet spots that he can pull up. Boston right now has, I think, possibly four first-round picks. I don't think all four guys will be on the roster opening day, so this pick could be for another team. But let's just say it is for Boston. They could have some depth issues with Kyrie's impending free agency, Terry Rozier, those guys are both point guards.
Yeah.
So, but like I said, I don't know if this pick is going to stay in Boston or not. To me, it just makes 100% sense for OKC to draft a shooter. They're one of the worst three-point shooting teams in the league. I watched the game against Portland a couple days ago, and they just could knock down. They could not make shots. I mean, if they would have made 30% of their threes, they win that game easily. They just need shooting. They need shooting in the worst way. If Tyler Herro's available, then that's who they should take. But Cameron Johnson, 6'9", 210, he's a floor spacer. You can probably slide him between the 3 and the 4, and that would be his role. Knock down shots, make life easier for Paul George and Russell Westbrook, and he would be the ideal fit for this roster. 22. Again, this is a Boston Celtics pick that we're not sure of where it will be, but P.J. Washington is a guy who I've also had a chance to watch in his AAU days. Back in Dallas, I got a chance to see him play when I was working with Mo Williams Academy. P.J. has made tremendous strides as a shooter. Even from, not including how he was in AAU, but just from his freshman year to his sophomore year, he became such a threat as a floor spacer. He's a good offensive rebounder. He plays hard. He runs the floor. He's a strong finisher. And now with the added face-up game and extending his range, he's a guy that could end up having a career maybe like David West. Maybe. I mean, David West was an all-star, so that could be a stretch. But I see a lot of similarities. Also, we'll transition to that in my next pick. Another guy who I think is somewhat similar is Grant Williams. And I have Grant Williams going 23rd to Utah. Derek Favors is a free agent, so we don't know which direction that Utah will go. But Grant Williams will be a guy who could possibly come in and slide in and replace Favors. He's not as big, but Utah seems to be one of the last teams that play two traditional bigs. So Williams is a guy that could possibly slide in at the 4 next year if they decide not to bring Favors back or decide against going small with Jay Crowder at the 4. At 24, to me, this is another no-brainer pick. Philadelphia selecting Ty Jerome for Virginia. I like Ty Jerome's game a lot. I saw a joke on Twitter that said if Ty Jerome was from Europe, he'd be a top 5 pick. And I chuckled at it, but I think there's some truth to it. He's a big guard, very good court vision. I love guys that can make plays for others. And Ty Jerome is a guy that slick passer, just creative as far as like with his court vision. He's a good shooter. He has good size. He's a guy that in Philly would be a good fit next to Ben Simmons. I think Ben struggles from time to time when the game slows down and you have to play in the half court. And there's a lot of times where Philly hides Ben at the dunker. So in my opinion, if you have another point guard on the floor that you can use Ben as a power forward, as a rim roller, I think he'd be even that much more effective because he has the vision and he has the instincts as a passer. So imagine a Ty Jerome, Ben Simmons pick and roll where you have Ben rolling, you hit him, as soon as the defense comes, he's able to find, whether it's Embiid at the dunker, find shooters in the corner. So I think that's a lineup that Philly should explore, but Ty Jerome to me is the perfect point guard for that because he can play one or the two, and he has the size to defend both. So Ty Jerome for Philly is a pick that I would love to see happen. At 25, the Portland TRAILBLAZERS select Chuma Okeke from Auburn. He probably won't play his rookie year because he tore his ACL in the NCAA tournament. But man, he was having a great tournament before the injury. He's a good shooter. He kind of reminds me of Mo Harkless a little bit. He may be a better outside shooter than Mo, but he's kind of like a hybrid 3-4, but more so a 4. He can space the floor. I think he's like a 38% career shooter from 3 in college, but then he is strong enough to attack switches and post smaller guards and make a few plays for you out of the post. Blazers obviously have a lot of guys that they're developing, and their developmental system is strong. But then again, you look at the roster, you see Caleb Swanigan didn't really get a chance to play. Zach Collins is kind of struggling for minutes. Myers Leonard doesn't get to play a lot of minutes. So the front court is crowded, but I think the Blazers are a team that can afford to take a chance on Okeke because they won't need him to be ready right away. We go down to 26, Daniel Gafford. I'm not sure why Daniel Gafford has slipped so far on my draft board and others, but I see a guy that could have a Clint Capella-like career, and if he's given the right system. He obviously needs to get stronger, but he has things that you can't teach. He's athletic, he has a motor, he runs the floor, quick twitch, pop, explosion in his jumps. He's a very high field goal percentage shooter. I think he's around 65% this season. Given the right system, imagine him in Houston or a pick and roll system. I have him going to Cleveland, and he could be a replacement for Tristan Thompson, who you have to wonder if the Cavs are going to just completely wash away or completely tear down players that are left from the LeBron James era. 27, the Nets, Bruno Fernando. Jared Allen is their center of the future. He'll be the center for a long time. Ed Davis is the backup. And the Nets they have a deep roster, and they could take a risk on Fernando. I think that he should be able to come in and maybe not a lot of minutes in year one, but maybe year two, and he could be an effective backup to Allen. Or this could be a pick that could be potentially moved. 28, Golden State. They have the luxury of a deep roster, and Jontay Porter is another player who could possibly miss his rookie year. He's out to injury, and man, the Porter family has had terrible luck in injuries. We know about Michael's history. He's missed pretty much the last 2 seasons, his freshman year at Missouri, and then he's missed all his rookie year. Jontay had a pretty good freshman year. He missed his sophomore year with the knee injury, and then we find out a couple weeks ago that he re-injured his knee, so he's going to miss more time. But Golden State is, they're the Warriors. They have the luxury of being patient and waiting. We don't know if DeMarcus Cousins will be back next year. And off the top of my head, I don't know Kevon Looney's contract situation. But Golden State is a team that could wait it out, let Porter develop with Santa Cruz, and then end up having another steal. 29, KZ Okpala from Stanford. Versatile guy. I mean, the Kawhi Leonard comparisons are a little far-fetched, but he does have good size. He has a nice skill set to work with. He made big strides from his freshman year to his sophomore year. Versatile, pretty good ball handler. Has a nice little floater. Doesn't shoot the three a lot. He can shoot it, but he doesn't shoot it a whole lot. And then he's a guy that the Spurs could, end up finding like this hidden gem and end up making this guy like an ideal fit for their system. And then at 30, I have the Milwaukee Bucks selecting Dylan Windler, and he's a shooter. Good size, 6'8", 200 pounds. The Bucks, right now, they have the star player. They have the potential MVP. It's all about finding complementary pieces around him. And Windler is a shooter, a knockdown shooter, who can do a little bit as far as attacking closeouts. And that's what the Bucks roster is going to be made of as long as Giannis is there. They have everything in place. Now it's just finding complementary pieces. And the complementary piece they're looking for will be sitting right there at number 30. Well, that's it for picks 15 through 30. Stay tuned for more podcasts, more videos. I'll probably drop a video of Yovel Zeusman later on today. And then I'll just keep on creating content, dropping videos. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't. Send me a message. I try to reply to as many as I can. And I'm thinking maybe within the next couple of weeks, I'll probably start another series. I haven't thought of the name of it, but it will more so it will be covering the first round picks and maybe some of the guys that are drafted in the second round, but it will be covering their weaknesses and what areas I think that they will need to improve on this summer. Thanks again for watching. This is Raphael with NBA Draft Junkies.